So every month, we do a future-proof masterclass to help you future-proof your career and your life. And one of the things that has been top on everyone's mind has been generative AI. And I have done so many keynotes on human potential in an age of generative AI that I thought it would be a great masterclass for all of us to do, um, with less of a maybe a corporate spin and more of a how the heck can we basically future proof our own careers. This is actually a conversation that I had when my future proof book came out, and I did a keynote in 2019 on human potential in an AI powered world. And so it's something that we've been thinking about a lot. Of course, it's really ramped up recently. So, what's going on? We have Kai-Fu Lee, who was, he's chair and CEO of Sinovation Ventures, but he was at Microsoft and Google and US and China, heading up their AI. And his take on the situation is that AI will create efficient services that will give us back our most valuable resource, time. However, nobody trusts it. So, 3,000 years ago, Aristotle defined three pillars of trust as knowledge and expertise. So, part of this is just to give you a sense, if you don't know, of like the big milestones in generative AI. So, one of them is this letter that has been signed by a lot of notable founders of generative AI, Jeffrey Hinton, who started large language models 20 years ago, et cetera, that are saying we are actually moving too fast. And Elon Musk, for instance, is saying the same thing, but people speculate that he's just trying to catch up. So that's a knowledge and expertise. Everybody feels like we don't have the knowledge and expertise to really pace ourselves. Openness and honesty. This is a Black Mirror episode called Joan is Awful. And it is about a woman who is a real beast at work, and they take her likeness and they start doing basically a show about Joan and how awful she is. And she sees it on Netflix with her boyfriend, and she's like, "They can't steal my likeness." And of course, they go down the T's and C's, and in fact, she's already signed away her likeness. And so it's an interesting idea about how our identities can have value without us. And certainly during the Hollywood writers' strike last year, a lot of the writers were saying, "Well, if I have this whole body of work, if generative AI can just digest that and churn out 10 more movies in the same style as Quentin Tarantino or whoever else, then how do I make a living?" And then concern and care. There's been a lot of different things that have happened over time, actually, in terms of generative AI. Bias is a huge one. It's one of the bigger ones. This one I picked out because it happened yesterday. And it's about a Hong Kong company that, in fact, lost 200 million because somebody within the company got on a conference call like this one, and I am real, by the way, I'm not a deep fake. They got on the conference call with a whole bunch of people, including the CFO, and were told to transfer money, and then they did it. So that is another AI-backed technology. The other people who don't really trust it are the people, of course, who actually made it. And you may be aware of the OpenAI board management conflict that happened last year, which was all about the actual board, which was a nonprofit, kind of do no evil, saying that they felt like OpenAI was a risk and not fulfilling its nonprofit aims. So that was a bit of a governance snafu in addition to AI. And of course, we feel like we can't keep up because it is the fastest growing consumer technology. People, interestingly, all over the world adopted it, mainly consumers. The top is, I think, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, and India. And unlike many technologies that start maybe in Silicon Valley and kind of never slowly go across the world, that one exploded. And companies are really struggling to keep up with that because a lot of times they'll say, not allow anybody to use it, but then people are using it on the side anyway. So, what does it mean for you? Um, I think that based on having done this for several years, that really last year was a strategic inflection point. Last year, people were thinking about, and I say this as somebody who was also involved in the metaverse and that kind of tanked. That was, too early. It wasn't the next big thing. It was a fad. Generative AI, based on the way that it's going into um, client workflows, certainly OpenAI's hookup with Microsoft to do Copilot and all of its functions means that it's actually really becoming mainstream quickly in a way that I don't think that most people can afford to ignore. And I'm a little worried because I do see a lot of people who really don't know much about it or are not thinking through what it means in terms of their careers. So, a couple of just general stats. There's a lot of talk about job displacement, and I just wrote an article about emerging tech more broadly. And there actually hasn't been that much displacement or job loss because of generative AI. Maybe 10% relative to these big numbers. Uh, and there's a lot of forecast in terms of what it's going to generate in terms of value. I think the interesting thing about the stats is that if you look less than a year apart, Goldman Sachs is talking about, 300 million jobs and $7 trillion of value. And already by January, granted it's a different firm, they're talking about 20 trillion of value created and 300 billion work hours a year saved. So the kind of momentum is increasing. Just an example, by 2030, just to kind of ground it in something real, generative AI could save doctors 3 hours a day, which would allow them to serve 500 million more patients globally per year. So when you think about your own career, you can think almost everybody will be affected, and a small number of people will have at least half of their job affected. And we'll talk now about really how to find out what that is and how we can think about future proofing against that. All right. So one of the big things is that how we spend our time will change. So in a perfect world, we would spend less time maybe or time on different things. So many people are saying, okay, what the great thing about this is that we'll spend less time, for instance, putting a table together of, a competitive analysis. We can just point to 5 websites and say, put a table and use these columns. And I've done that many times. It's actually kind of amazing, especially for somebody who's really terrible at formatting. So those things will allow us to then spend more time on interesting things. And some of the places already where that's happening is certainly marketing and sales. We already use generative AI quite a lot in future-proof work. Not so much on the personalized marketing, but we're a tiny firm, and certainly even years ago, before generative AI, there was a lot of chatbots, and that's a huge place that it's being changed. Legal work in terms of crafting contracts, etc. So I think that one way to think about it is that the value that you may create at work will change. So I'll give you a couple of examples. From my time at Financial Times, there was a real premium on people who could write in a Financial Times voice and in a Financial Times way. And it was really difficult in emerging markets or places where English was not as spoken, to find people who could write like the FT, but also um, have the ideas and the kind of access. And now, because of generative AI, actually, um, the value that people that we're looking for, that FT is looking for in journalists, has changed. They're looking for people with the ideas and the access, because that's rare and that's a human thing. Like, you really can connect, for instance, to somebody that is empowered, that you went to high school with, or that you kept up with, or happen to be able to charm yourself into a relationship with, or have a relationship with. Whereas the writing now is less important. So the value shift is really different. Um, Not all of it's obvious. So the latest Oliver Wyman report talks about how 36% of people prefer AI over humans for financial advice. And that's something where you think, oh, well, I need a compassionate person to, help me figure all this out. Actually, no, people don't like the judgment. And my um, Kai-Fu Lee actually once said, "Oh, psychiatrists will be the last remaining people that aren't interrupted by AI." But actually, even mental health apps are seeing that people don't like the judgment of having another human being across the chair from them. So some of those apps are becoming chatbots via AI. Um, so if an artist, for instance, or a writer could sell their likeness in perpetuity for future films, even if they aren't around, if Brad Pitt just keeps on going and going and going, what does that mean for you as a new entrant, as an actor? Or if Henry Kravis continues to be at the head of KKR, or even Tony Robbins, who's, the big motivational speaker. Like, if he continues on, you have to ask, like, what is it for people who are going into their new fields, and what can they do? Um, so here's two case studies that are really on two ends of the spectrum. And part of this conversation is just to kind of give you guys like a curated, condensed version of the most important aspects. So this is a pretty well-known study at this point that speaks to that value, and it is around customer service. And Stanford and MIT did a research study on generative AI systems, and they found that it enhanced productivity by 14%, especially for new people or low performing employees. So if they were just coming in, it would accelerate their learning curve, allow workers to gain 6 months of experience in 2 months, which is a huge savings. When I was a consultant, we did a huge piece of work for a call center, and the churn is so immense in a call center that actually, to be able to accelerate from 6 to 2 months for a person that's only going to stay there probably 12 months is a huge saving. And maybe they'll stay there longer. The problem is that all of a sudden, all the lower performing workers are doing better, but the higher performing workers who are feeding all of their knowledge into this system don't benefit as much. They're actually giving more benefit. So if you're thinking about, how people are paid, do you just pay more to the people who are benefiting from AI? Do you pay less? How do you, as a person maybe who has that expertise, figure out how to get compensated for it? So these are all things that people are thinking about in terms of their own careers. So professional services on the other end of the spectrum, this is BCG and Harvard, and they did a study across 750 BCG consultants worldwide to see how generative AI affected performance. And they used GPT-4 for regular consulting tasks. And generally, those people who came to those tasks, they would complete the tasks 25% faster and with 40% higher quality. So that sounds all in all good. The interesting thing, and I should just pause here. I want to ask you guys, please raise your hand if you have used GPT-4 or GPT-3. Okay. No? All right. I see a few hands. Okay. So we could go over some of that as well. But GPT-4, at the time they did the survey, basically it was just the fourth edition. It was the best one at that time. And they used it, and what they found is when they did the generative AI. So let's think of a sort of normal consulting task, like summarizing the research, benchmarking a telecom, and they would say, okay, GPT-4, why don't you summarize all this research and even put it on slides or whatever it is they do? So they would do that super fast, and it would be higher quality. There wouldn't be, as somebody who used to be a poor schmuck at the bottom of the consulting pyramid, there wouldn't be as many like summarizations from a 22-year-old who uses, as my partner would say, purple prose and doesn't pick the highlights the right way, et cetera. So you can imagine how ChatGPT could do that better. However, the interesting thing, as somebody who always tries to find a better way and improve on anything I get, is that the consultants who took the results and tried to improve upon them actually fared worse than those who just said, here you go, ChatGPT, totally fine. So the other aspect is that those people who attempted new and novel tasks with generative AI likewise didn't see such a boost. So I think the takeaway from this case study really is it's not for everything. It's not, like a hammer and everything then looks like a nail. You can use it to simplify complex processes, and that is really useful. You can use it less and should use humans to lead novel new initiatives. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. Let me just pop over to the chat and see who left a question. Intellectual property-ish. Okay, Watson, what does that mean?
Well, just the idea of intellectual property was similar to the idea of somebody can exist kind of into the future based on their historical work. So if you own something that you, like an idea,
Yeah.
that can have a longer life. So it seems like a similar path, but the AI's ability to rob individual work is light years ahead of what it was when you would hear things about intellectual property.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And there is, a website. If you've written a book, you can go and see if your book was one of the books that they used to train the models. And you don't, then there's a collective group of people who are trying to sue for that. And in fact, I'm sure the individual authors won't get very far, but the newspapers are also considering, those that have been used are considering suing for intellectual property theft, basically. But it's difficult. And of course, the legal system is grappling with this in many different respects. But in terms of copyright, they are trying to figure out how you can do it. I'm trying to remember. There's a great podcast on it. If any of you guys are in legal and you want it, I can send it to you. I can't remember. It's there's a new word that's not copyright. It's some other protective right that they've coined to protect against generative AI. So what are the new skills? What are you going to need to think about? The Microsoft Work Trends report talks about AI. It's kind of self-serving. Apologies to any of you who are here from Microsoft. But they have been leading. And so some of the work trends are about how everybody will work with AI and everybody should love AI. And to be fair, Microsoft has integrated AI more than probably anyone into their systems in a way that allows you to kind of use it without knowing it, or without having to learn, how to be a prompt engineer or to do it in a different or better way. So some of the stuff that they're seeing their clients start to hire for is related to almost the problems in AI. So, the analytical judgment that you pair with the results, the emotional intelligence that you use which we'll talk a little bit about later, not just creativity, but creative evaluation, because you get all of a sudden, instead of a blank sheet of paper, you get 25 different options. So how do you evaluate which one would resonate best? Bias detection and handling. That's one of my clients did a huge interview skills AI project, and then ultimately with Google, and ultimately abandoned it because they couldn't get the bias out. So those are all interesting options. So Sharon, have they done a study on whether entry-level employees are really learning the actual subject matter or just how to use AI to get info? That's a really good question. I think that, so if you think about the two case studies, one is the customer service, and they need to be able to respond to a customer in an appropriate way with the right information. So I would argue that, that one of the skills of a customer service rep is being able to find the information that matches the customer complaint or customer request. And so, in a way, I don't see that as being mutually exclusive. And in terms of the higher order, I know that you're in legal, so I can imagine like one of the big chats around that is the fact that, you used to put paralegals and young people into just combing through these documents, and you would kind of learn things from your many hours at the coalface. And in that way, I don't think people have really thought about, like for consulting is a little bit like that. If I can just summarize a document and I barely have to read it, is there something lost in the process? I don't know. In the past, we used to have to pick and be really meticulous. I don't know that anybody knows that yet. Okay, Steve. Looking at the diagram suggests a total of several 100% rather than, okay. That is because it was multiple choice and people could pick more than one. But thank you. It's good to be kept on your toes by your audience. I'm glad you're listening and watching. So I think that managing career is important, and there's kind of two sides to that. First of all, Sharon, did I answer your question enough? Yes, maybe. Let me
Sorry,
know.
I'm not muted, right?
No, you're not muted.
Yeah.
Did that
No,
answer
you
your
did.
question?
You did. I get that. Well, if anybody's called a customer service thing, it's good when you get the standard answer. You're thrilled if somebody can kind of use some judgment to know that maybe that standard answer didn't really answer the question, or there's nuance,
Yeah.
And some of that you just learn over time, I guess. But I get gathering information and getting information is important. How to use it, maybe that's your point about the people skills, right? And what's right in the right circumstance. And if you can tell, like, yeah, that answer didn't really satisfy them, now what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good point. And you see chatbots all over the place in customer service, and you kind of have to run the gauntlet. I feel like we're being trained as customers to say like, okay, what is it that I need to say to the AI chatbot in order to get a human? So,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah, there is a lot of nuance. So thinking about all of your own careers or the people that you're working with, or if you're on a board, thinking about the company that you're kind of have a top level overview of. There's two aspects. One is this kind of perpetual drumbeat of how are AI systems working. And it looks like a couple of people like I didn't go into that aspect. It's pretty meta in terms of this, but you can certainly find a lot of that on the web, or we can do another session. I'm happy to do that. And one of the ways that you can do that is having a general sense of it, but then give yourself an assignment to work on. And one of our future proofers actually did that, and he built an app. And he said, okay, like I think that frontline workers need some kind of prompting, and that generative AI would be really good for that. And so he got 3 different AI apps together to create a prototype. And he said he learned so much from that that it was, it just sort of put him head and shoulders above almost everybody else. And so while that is probably a pretty big ask for most people, like saying, okay, how can I use AI to give my next presentation? And thinking about the different tasks that you might get help on can be really useful. Or going to do a workshop. I know even at the board level, when I talk to other people who are doing, board level futures thinking or how to keep up on AI, and we talk about what's the most useful thing. And it's truly like, let's get our hands dirty. Let's break out the PO or whatever is available in your market and do a couple of workshops. Like if you're on a board, it's okay. Let's see if we use generative AI to point out risks based on the last 4 years of annual reports. What will they come up with that we do not? Or what kind of questions might we ask for internal audit? So, it's not just for generating pretty pictures and marketing materials. Find your source to stay updated on AI advancements. Because there's so much out there, we actually at the end of this have a QR code, and we did an AI checklist. So we listed a curated list of some of the resources that we think are credible, but it depends on your industry, and it depends on, if you're in fund management, it may be something different that you're looking at. And one of the things I'll go through next is really thinking through your own thinking to consider how AI can be leveraged in the way that you're thinking and the work that you're doing. And then to Sharon's point, really the cultivate the human strengths of emotional intelligence and ethics and strategic thinking, and the soft skills. So this is about augmenting thyself. This is kind of an ask, but I think that I've found it really useful. So think about all the different tasks that you do, and even think about the thought process that you go through. So I'll give you an example. When I'm going to do a talk, for instance, and I think about what I have to, first I'll think about the people, think about, okay, what are they thinking? And that, involves a little bit of put yourself in their shoes. For instance, when I do corporate keynotes, I think about my specific company that I'm working with, because some are in tech and some are in banking, et cetera. Or if I'm doing coaching, I think, okay, so how can I understand that person? And then I might do some research, and then I might summarize the research, get it down to a few bullet points, think about the visuals, et cetera, et cetera. So literally, what is I think is so helpful is if you can take what you do for a specific job. I know some of you have a lot of jobs, and say, okay, let me just list it all down, or do a flow chart. And which one of these things do I think could be better done by a computer or AI? And you might find that it'll pop up in surprising ways. And then when you think about that, let's say I want to do a presentation and, first I'll do the research. Well, research is a place where AI excels. Summarization is a place where it excels. Graphics and organizing information. So when I think about that, and actually I did this last year for a keynote about AI, and what I found in terms of my complementary skill is first I asked it, okay, I literally asked it to do the entire presentation, which was about like trends in AI. And it did the most amazing, most boring ever presentation about like, you know, a lot of stats, not some of the ones that we have in here too, but what I decided is that okay, actually my complementary skill is to tell a story. So in fact, that whole keynote was imagine what would happen if we had an entire new day in the week because of AI. It was taking that statistic and saying if we got 14% of our time back, that's like having 8 days. Imagine what would you do with that? So my complementary skill was storytelling, um, and then thinking about really what part of my thinking can be augmented by AI, because those things are kind of tasks. When you think about how you're thinking that can be augmented, it's a little bit like there's recently like the Financial Times just posted something about how people are using AI in brainstorming. And if you're just using it in a kind of Google search type way, where you go, please tell me everything about broccoli, that is actually not that useful. But if you start thinking about the way that you're thinking, the connections you're making, and how where you get stuck, for instance, that could be augmented, or where your information is too limited, or the connections you have are too limited, start digging into that and think, wow, what could I do to augment the way that I'm thinking about something, and really ultimately augment myself. So I'm going to give you a little hack. This is the Job Impact Index. And so partly because this is super easy in terms of your speaker kind of does one thing. This is also in the checklist that we'll give you with the QR code at the back, but it is basically like you can plug in AI, you can plug in one of the things that you do, and it'll tell you what the impact is. Now, this is rudimentary. It's based on all these AI apps that they have in this database, but it's still interesting, and it'll give you a sense of some of the tasks that go into some of the big buckets that you might call upon. So if you're a teacher, if you are a consultant, if you are a coach, some of the stuff is funny because people have made really weird apps like, chat with Elon Musk or whatever. But it starts to give you a sense of, oh, actually, maybe the presentation, like there are like 36 apps that can turn whatever I do into presentation. So maybe I'm going to stop getting any better at presentations and go back to that. Like, what is my role? What are the things that AI is not cannibalizing already? Oh, thanks. Fez put in the Job Impact Index as well. So that is an interesting way as you think about, okay, what are the things I do that AI may be able to help with? For example, you can see for speaker, there's 1,300 tasks that go into being a speaker. Now, not all of those, are ones that you really do or will want to do. But it'll give you at least some idea in terms of how to break it down. Because at a certain point, we don't even know what we know or what we do. All right. So to the human qualities, this was a couple of days ago, actually, the tasks that involved distinctly human qualities like emotional intelligence, out of the box thinking, and moving into roles that center those skills could help lessen the chance of being replaced. There's a couple of stories, I guess, I want to tell you about how I see the future of work evolving with generative AI specifically and AI more generally. One of the things is care, and that's human presence, it's mobility, it's a human touch. Um, Funny enough, Wired magazine in 2017 has a great sci-fi story called The Human Placebo about how it's like so long ago, way before generative AI. And it is about a sort of grade B actor that goes to a bedside, and the actor does not make any decisions. It is literally guided by the machine, and they'll say, this patient has purchased grade B hospice care. So please be direct and kind to them, but not overly demonstrative. And it's kind of chilling, but also interesting. So I think that the care element in a time when, we're not together and we can go into VR and play games. And, my kids, of course, spend a lot of time with their friends virtually, and we spend a lot of time remote working and virtual. Like in that world, figure out how to be the bartender, figure out how to be really human and how to talk to people. And some of the examples of this, this physicality and this caring are, this is on the left is Eldpathy, which is a group that actually has restraints that mirror how people, as they get older, have physical deterioration so that they can build better products for them. So this is an interesting example, I think, of how we can be empathetic humans and build a better world for others. And then the other one is just adding value via extra care. Like one of the hotels in Asia that I used to travel to as a working mom used to have little teddy bears so that if you were going away to Tokyo for 2 days, you could come home and you'd actually have this special little something that you could bring home. And so those kind of small gestures that are uniquely human and uniquely caring and thinking about not just the basics, but what could we do to do something extra that fills a deep human need or a gaping maw of guilt, as in the case of a working mom. The second one is connecting. So it's, what is it that requires more sophisticated interpersonal relationships? So maybe like the customer service, Sharon, where you're thinking about not just fix the problem, but like truly when we would train customer service executives and some of my corporate jobs, it was talking about the fact that people need to be heard, and the less they feel heard, the more upset they feel. And so it doesn't, and that is transcends solving the problem and becomes a very human element. And when we teach interpersonal dynamics at the business school, it can be really different and really impactful. Lean into being more human for the win. Thanks, Watson. So this is an example of that connection, that kind of deeply connecting to somebody. This is me and my mom, and I was traveling to see her in Arizona, and I was trying to think, what could I get her that would really delight her? And so I called this chocolate place that she used to take me in New York City when I was a really young kid, and we'd go every week. And they'd moved to LA, and I talked to the woman, and I was like, I used to go there when I was a little kid, and I want to get chocolates for my mom. It's been forever. And so the woman said, "Oh my gosh, that was my dad. And I used to get free chocolates." And she said, "Oh, yeah, my name's Diana too. And I can't believe that you went to our old shop and it's a family business." And she, said, "Oh, you're sending it to Arizona. I want to make sure it's okay." And so, because of the heat. And so I said, "Yeah, it's fine. Just send me like few little things." And she ended up sending us like everything that I bought and purchased, plus, more, and a handwritten note that said, "Oh my gosh, you've been part of my, generations of our family business, and we feel so grateful." And, therein lies a customer for life. So really thinking like in my hospitality clients, sometimes they don't think about the fact that, somebody's coming to have a wedding at their hotel. Like this is a moment, this is a day in the life that they will remember for the rest of their lives. So really thinking around the human needs. So that's about in a work setting or a client setting or just about any setting. Some of the deep human needs that we're trying to do and create at work are an opportunity for connection, an opportunity for belonging for employees and consumers alike, and an opportunity for recognition. And those three things, if you can create that in a culture or for your clients, can be very powerful. Yep. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The third one is being able to create. And because all of my examples are kind of artsy, before we go into that, I think it's really about creating something new. And that can be new ideas, it can be new strategies, it can be a business strategy, it can be a legal strategy, a way to win the case. It doesn't have to be paint. This is one of the women that I met in London, and she is an interesting case because she's a designer that uses AI, and she talks a lot. Francesca uses Midjourney, which creates these photo-like pictures, and she will think about her fashion, and then she will create it in Midjourney with different looks to it and different feel, and then she will put it out there and have people give their feedback on it, and then she does the prototype. So when we went to visit her studio, you could see in her, sort of her apartment/studio in Canary Wharf, you could see all these like 3D printers and like soldering irons and all kinds of stuff that they use to make their prototypes, she and her husband. And the other aspect of it, the sort of empathetic aspect, is that she's doing tech wearables to enhance human connection. So her AI-powered clothing will connect people with who have trouble either hearing or seeing to the vibrations or light. So she has a hug shirt and a sound shirt where during COVID, she gave it out and did an experiment with NHS in London where they would wear the shirts. And if you wanted to give your grandma a hug, you could take your phone and literally ping them a hug, and then the shirt would just vibrate a little bit. And that was a way to get them connected. And then they also used it with sound for people. And there was one woman who had not spoken for 2 years in the elderly home. And they had her wear the shirt and played her favorite song. And she started singing it. It was an old song. And everybody was astonished. And they thought, well, maybe it just sort of activated something between the vibrations and the song and the sound. And afterwards, they said, did you like the song? And she said, yes, I liked it very much. And she started, not speaking fluently again, but she had that one sentence. And so they're really looking into how that can really create new ways to reactivate people who have lost function. And this is hometown girl from Hong Kong, Sophia Hotung. Some of you guys might know her mom, Joanna. And she actually did a project where they created a campaign with Sophia, the humanoid robot, who's also a Hong Kong hometown girl from Hanson Robotics. And I interviewed her because I was curious what her experience was. Sophia the robot is AI powered. And she said she's really worried because most of her art is graphic art. It is kind of exactly the kind of art that people expect to be cannibalized by AI. And she said that it was an interesting to sort of have an idea and then pass it over to Sophia, the robot, and then have it come back and kind of collaborate was really interesting. And she said it's less about being the best graphic artist so that I outrun AI and more. This is one aspect and really specific to generative AI, but it is related to the future proof competencies, which are really future focused. And so if you think about generative AI specifically, you think about scanning the horizon for, what's coming down the pike. And that's part of what I wanted to do today is to say, here's all these new things that people are talking about. It's about having your own filter for sense making and trying to synthesize them and adapt them to your own life. And also try to figure out how that is interacting with your own purpose, how the way you interact with your AI or generative AI and how you are going to use it will feed into your story, how it keeps you particularly connected and adaptable over your whole life, not just your work environment.